Hi, welcome to Podcasts for Patients. I'm Lee Clark, Director of Patient Services, and I'd like to thank our corporate sponsors and our patients and families for supporting the podcast series. I have the pleasure today in chatting with Damian about his journey with aplastic anemia and transplant. Welcome, Damian. It's so nice to have you with us today.
Good morning. Yeah, hi. I appreciate being here.
So, Damian, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Yeah, so my name is Damian Carbajal. I'm originally from Tucson, Arizona. I'm 31 years old. I have a brother and a sister. We are all military. Prior to diagnosis, I was in the Air Force. I worked on radar jamming systems for about 6 years, and then I made a transition to a flying career field as a flight engineer, and it was a really great experience. But yeah, it's a little bit about me.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your service and for your family's service. And so you said you were in the military. Anything else going on in your life before your diagnosis of aplastic anemia? And what led to the diagnosis?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting story, and I don't know how similar it is for other patients, but my diagnosis actually was found on a fluke, really. As I mentioned before, I worked in a previous job, and I was looking to transition to a new career field, and with that, the new job entailed a flight physical, and this is just standard for all people who are looking to become air crew. And in there, they did a blood draw, and the doctors came back and they told me that at first it was, oh, hey, you're anemic. Your blood is just a lot, your numbers are just a lot lower than the normal. So they did further investigating. This happened in January of 2017. And with that, it was just kind of more extensive tests here and there. And it took about a year, but I was at a plateau, and they just decided that I could fly. So I went through all kinds of training, survival schools, water survival, um, egressing, jumping out of the aircraft if needed to if the aircraft was going down. So I was able to perform. I did a lot of stuff. Aside from that, I was fairly active. My first base was in Utah, so there was lots of mountains and a lot of outdoor things to do. So I kind of got into snowboarding in the winter, and travel was just a really big passion of mine as I deployed constantly and things. So I was always on the move, and through that, I just never really thought I had anything going on. But once they told me, hey, you have discrepancies in your blood, from there, a whole slew of different things kind of cascaded from there, which eventually led to my medical retirement from the military.
Damien, how long did it take for you to finally get a diagnosis?
Okay, so with with being in the military, I constantly moved. Discrepancies came about when I was in Florida, and this had around that time I had just gotten back from South Korea, or spending a year in South Korea, and I was living in Panama City, Florida. There was doctors there that between military doctors and civilian doctors, they ran their own tests. They approved me for flight. I did schooling in various places, and and then I moved to New Mexico, in a very rural city or town called Clovis, New Mexico. And from there, it was just different doctor. I was at a cancer center, and that cancer center pushed me to a center in Lubbock, Texas. And then finally in Lubbock, Texas, I was pushed to the Mayo Clinic in Phoenix. And and so for that whole duration of time, that goes from 2017 all the way until March of 2022. Um, and at that point, that was pretty much, I retired in March of 2022 on March 5th. And then by March 7th, I was on a plane to Rochester, Minnesota to the Mayo Clinic. And that's where I finally got my diagnosis. But being that there's a lot of subtleties with the myelodysplastic syndrome, as well as aplastic anemia, it was hard for doctors to kind of determine which one I had. And as it would actually turn out, I had other genetic mutations within my blood that led to the source being short telomere syndrome. And but albeit the fix, no matter what, I was told, hey, you're going to need a bone marrow transplant, regardless of what the diagnosis is. And so they just kept making a push for that transplant. But being that the treatments are different with aplastic anemia and myelodysplastic syndrome, they really wanted to kind of solidify which route they wanted to go with.
5 years is a long time to wait for a diagnosis so you can get started on the path to treatment.
Yes, ma'am. And even going past that, finding a donor is also is always a hard thing too with these diseases, especially if it's an unrelated donor, which is in my case was what we had to go with.
When you heard that your best option was a transplant, what were your perceptions? What did you think a transplant was and what it was going to be like?
I think ignorance was probably like one of the things that kind of helped me through this because I mean, if I really thought about it and dwelled on it, I think it's very very daunting when you hear transplant. I mean, initially you think of, oh hey, like it's an organ in the sense that you'll just take the faulty part out and put a healthy part in or something. And when it comes to bone marrow, it's kind of it's bone marrow. It's something that you kind of don't think about, and even past that, you're like, how do they swap that out, or what do they do to fix it in that sense? And so it was a lot, and I think though it took a really long time, it was kind of just a lot of, and I'm sure other people go through this as well, especially with these diseases. And in my case, it was very slow, and the progression wasn't as rapid until it got very bad, and then it was okay. Hey, we have to act now, and so it was a lot of hurry up and wait, or doctors constantly saying, "Hey, it's not bad enough. We're going to continue to monitor." And I think that's the common term that I was faced with during the whole time. And I think in that was probably the most frustrating and kind of just that was probably the most scariest part was just the waiting, the looming of, hey, we know what we have to do, but we can't act on it quite yet because either you're not sick enough or we want to we don't have very many shots at this. We want to give it our best shot when you need it the most. But when it comes to the actual bone marrow transplant, I really didn't think of it. I just, hey, I knew it was a thing that we had to do. And so long as it wasn't, we need to do this tomorrow, I didn't really think about it.
And how did things go with your transplant?
At this point, I had a diagnosis in March of 2022. We continued to monitor. The appointments went from once a year to 6 months to every 3 months to every month to every 2 weeks to every week. And so there was a progression there. But from March 2022 until May of 2023, that's when I actually initiated the transplant. So there was still a lot of time in between. But unfortunately, the transplant was filled with a lot of setbacks. But thankfully, from May 2023 to now, I can proudly say that I was granted a successful transplant. The first one did not go as well. Um, um, I made it to about day 60 post transplant, where I encountered a, a condition called HLH, which is, I believe, hemophagocytis lymphocyto. I'm not even going to try that, but it's HLH, and what it effectively did was my white blood cells started attacking other cells within my body, and that eradicated the donor cells that I received. So I spent a lot of time getting transfusions every other day, every day. And this was transfusions of either vitamins of magnesium, potassium, uh, hemoglobin, uh, and platelets. And I wasn't retaining and I wasn't producing any cells. And so, and to make it worse, I had nosebleeds. It just seemed like a bad situation. And but gratefully in November of 23, I got a second transplant, and I'm feeling a lot better. Blood numbers are going up. I just had a blood draw this last week, and my platelets are in the normal range. My white blood cells and neutrophils are in where they need to be. My hemoglobin is still slow to rise, but it's getting there. My bone marrow transplant that should have only taken um, those 100 days or so ended up being a whole endeavor of about 8 months, where I was pretty much in the parking lot of the Mayo Clinic and going doing outpatient or inpatient appointments. So that's pretty much my story with that.
And with your second transplant, what do you think was different?
I really can't say. I mean, prior to the first transplant, I really made an effort to make myself the best candidate. I was working out 6 times a week. I was eating very healthy. I was going to therapy. I was doing all kinds of things. I was spiritually getting myself prepared. I made myself as a great a candidate as I could. And I just think that it wasn't either there was something with the cells where I know that with the first transplant, I accepted the cells. I began to kind of reproduce said cells, but after a period of time, I plateaued, and then they didn't take. And and I know that in talking into various other groups that this isn't something that is completely uncommon. I mean, you hope that it works the first time through, but it in my case it just didn't. And there's no real distinct, hey, this is why it didn't work, and versus why the second one worked better. I can say that there was different treatments and different chemos that were used. The first transplant, I did 5 days of chemo. I did one zap of radiation, 2 days of chemo post that, and then immunosuppression. That immunosuppression was with tacrolimus. And then the second transplant, they changed it up because I was already in a vulnerable state. I did not do any radiation, and I did a different chemo regimen. So 5 days of chemo, no radiation, transplant, and then that same day of transplant, I started chemo again. There was more of a initiative to just be quick and cautious because of because I had just already gone through the transplant. But I think in that there was a lot of vulnerability. So my body was just kind of it just gone through all this stuff. It was in a very like weakened state. So it was more adept to possibly accepting those. And that's kind of what I personally believe. Just I was ready to take any cells, just my body needed to produce something, and that's kind of where I ended up.
And Damian, what is it that you would like for other patients to know?
I would say that you somewhat have to trust the process and rely on your support networks. I was very fortunate through this whole time to have people caregiving for me and for countless people looking out for me. Um, and so I I know there are some people who want to do this on their own, who are highly independent, and I was of that mind. But it took certain things to kind of click in my head where I was like, I need people. I need to I need to rely on the people who are around for me because I just need them. And so I'm grateful that I have family, friends, and the medical teams that were around, people in the community just trying to be there for me. So I would say community is a very important thing. And even in those times that it seems like nothing is working, just hold on tight and keep pursuing forward. Those are kind of the things that got me through it. It was I mean, I never really have blamed anyone saying, why has this happened to me? Instead, I kind of view this as I get to experience this. And that may sound weird, but I have the opportunity to go through something that a lot of people don't go through. and it's made me a better person. It's made me a stronger individual. It's made me more resilient. And I had to say I'm grateful for that, because it's opened up doors where, like, even in this opportunity, I get to speak and share my experience in hopes of helping other people. And though I may not be able to serve in the military anymore, I feel like I get to serve in a different capacity by sharing my story. So I think it's a lot of perspective, and just kind of being open to the fact that things might not look like how you want them to, but if you can maintain some a semblance of positivity, because I understand that none of this is easy, and going through it, there was many times where I just wanted to give up. But in those instances, that's where your community really comes into play. They help you out. They're there to give you that extra support, or push you forward, or just be there for you as a shoulder to cry on, and such. Um, so in that, I think community, utilizing your resources, asking questions. I know during the first transplant, I was kind of quiet. I just was like, they're the doctors, they're the professionals. But in that, they're also human. It doesn't hurt to just ask questions, and really cultivate knowledge within yourself of, like, what's going on, because at the end of the day, even as the patient, you have a vested interest in your health. And so gaining as much knowledge as you can only makes you better suited, because I think in transplant, everyone serves a purpose. It's a team mentality. We're all going to get through this together. And so you need to play a part, whether that's you're doing your walks, or you're eating. And even if eating is not eating solid foods, you're just drinking fluids. You're doing what you need to do to effectively accomplish the mission. I really treated this as a deployment. So that was my mentality. It got me through it. And
Thank you so much, Damian, for sharing your story and your advice for patients. It really does help patients hearing from other patients about things that they've been through, so they know what to expect, and can give some insight. So thank you very much for being so open with your experiences. And if you'd like to learn more about transplant, we have lots of information on our website, which is aamds.org, which also has many videos through our webinar series. So please do take those opportunities, and please feel free to give us a call. We can help with answering your questions as well. So thank you again, Damian, for sharing today. This concludes our podcast.